Please leave a comment where you are watching from. My mom's Filipino, born and raised in the quiet, tangled provinces near a place called Caramon. If you've never heard of it, picture lush green mountains, winding rivers, dirt roads, and every corner filled with stories you won't find in any travel brochure. Her family was big. Really big. 11 kids. My mom was smack in the middle, number 6, so she got to be both bossy and ignored depending on the day. They lived in a tiny wooden house that leaned a bit to the left and had no bathroom. Showers happened in the river or under a bucket, and cooking was always done outside, over an open flame on a 3-stone fire pit. Rain meant trouble, and typhoons meant you prayed. Their lives were humble and rough around the edges, but to them, it was just life. My Lolo, my grandfather, was a fisherman. Not the kind with a motorboat and nets. I'm talking about dugout canoes and lines of hooks wrapped around bottles. My Lola stayed home, wrangled the kids, and somehow made magic happen with rice, salt, and whatever fish he brought back. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And, as my mom always says, they also had the weird. See, out in the provinces, the forest isn't just trees and dirt. It watches. It listens. And sometimes it whispers. My mom told me this story when I was around 14. We were sitting on the couch during a thunderstorm, and I think she was in a nostalgic mood. She started talking about her childhood, then paused and said, "You want to hear something really messed up?" Of course I did. She said Lolo only told her this story once, late at night when they were sitting outside, roasting sweet potatoes over some dying coals. He never told it again. And since he only spoke Tagalog and a little Bicolano, she had to translate it for me as best she could. Some words she didn't even want to translate. She said they didn't feel right in English. So here's what she told me, as best as I remember it. It was 1957. The stars were out, the moon was sharp and bright, and Lolo had just come back from a long day of fishing. Lola had given birth earlier that day to her 4th child, a baby boy who would grow up to be the uncle who never really talked much. The house was full of sleeping children and one exhausted mother, so Lolo decided to stay outside and make some warm broth for her. Now after a birth there's stuff? Blood. Cloths. The afterbirth. All of it had been wrapped in a plain sheet, and without much time or energy to deal with it properly, Lolo tossed the bundle near a small, young coconut tree by the cooking area, planning to burn or bury it the next morning. Back then, people believed you had to dispose of that stuff carefully, or else things could be drawn to it. He was crouched near the fire, stirring broth in a blackened pot, when he heard it. A slurping sound. Wet, sticky, disgusting, like someone chewing raw meat with their mouth open. At first, he thought it was one of the dogs, maybe sniffing around. But something felt off. There were no footsteps, no snuffling, just this slow, slurping noise. He turned. And there it was. It was crouched low, almost like a dog, but not shaped like one. Its limbs were too long, and its joints bent the wrong way. Its skin, or what he could see of it in the flickering firelight, was like burnt tree bark, cracked and flaking, and its eyes glowed red, not bright, but smoldering like coals buried in ash. It had no mouth that he could see, but it was feeding, devouring. Lolo froze. He'd seen sharks, snakes, men with knives. But nothing like this. He said the fire seemed to shrink as the thing fed, as if it were drawing in the light itself. The air grew thick, heavy like oil. Even the frogs had gone silent. But Lolo didn't run. That's the part that always gets me. I would have sprinted into the trees and not looked back. But him? He stayed calm. He didn't shout or scream. Instead, he reached into the fire with the edge of his shirt wrapped around his hand, grabbed a burning rock, one of the ones he'd ringed the pit with, and threw it as hard as he could. It hit the creature square in the back. What followed wasn't a scream, not exactly. It was more like a growl that started deep and gurgling, like something dying, and then got louder. Louder than it should have been. The creature arched, turned its head. Not all the way, just enough for Lolo to catch the glint of something like teeth. And then it leapt, vanished into the trees with a crack of branches. He stood there, shaking, ears ringing from that awful sound, broth forgotten and bubbling over. He didn't wait. He grabbed a shovel, dug a hole right there by the fire, and dropped the remaining sheet into it. Then he shoveled hot coals and embers in after it, and buried it all with dirt and rocks. He stayed up the rest of the night, a knife in one hand, rosary in the other. The next morning, the dirt was torn open. Not dug, not clawed, torn. The rocks had been flung aside like pebbles. The sheet? Gone. No blood. No ash. Nothing but a trail of blackened footprints that led back toward the trees and then stopped, like the thing had vanished mid-step. When my mom told me the next part of the story, she paused and said, "Your Lolo didn't scare easy." But that night stuck with him. You could see it in the way he looked at the trees after sunset. So the next morning he didn't say much. Just told Lola that he'd handled it. Buried the cloth, added coals, did a blessing with salt and some kind of oil he kept in a bottle, probably old coconut oil mixed with herbs from the nearby hillside. That was a common thing back then. If you knew someone who knew someone, they'd give you stuff to keep the spirits off your back. But when the family woke up and he saw what had happened, that the dirt had been torn open, rocks flung like they were weightless, and the bundle completely gone, something shifted in him. That silence, that quiet hum beneath the trees, it was still there, like the land had taken a deep breath and hadn't let it out yet. He didn't talk about it for years. A few things changed after that. He started building little altars near the house. Nothing fancy, just stones, a small bamboo cross, a candle or two. But he'd light them every evening before the sun dipped behind the palms. He told the kids not to play by the coconut trees at dusk. He started sleeping with a beyond-the-lookout blade under his sleeping mat. My mom said the weirdest part was that the animals stopped coming near the fire pit. The dogs, cats, even the chickens, they gave it a wide berth, like the ground there held a memory they couldn't forget. And some nights, when the moon was low and the wind blew just right, you could still hear it. That slurping sound. Just faint, like something licking its fingers in the dark. They never found the sheet. And no animal in that area ever gave birth near that spot again. There were whispers, of course. Out in the provinces, people don't call it paranormal. They just call it known. You don't whistle at night. You don't answer when something calls your name from the trees. And you never, ever leave birth remains unburned. Some thought it was an aswang, one of those shapeshifters that feeds on blood, meat, afterbirth, anything tied to life or death. Others said it was a sigbin, a creature that walks backward and drinks shadows. Lolo never said which he thought it was. But one night, years later, when he'd had a bit too much tuba and my mom asked him again, he said this in Tagalog. Hindi hayop. Hindi tao. Iba siya. Not an animal. Not a man. It was something else. Here's the part that always gets me, though. Decades later, long after they'd moved inland and most of the kids had grown up and scattered to cities and other countries, my uncle, the same one who was born that night, started getting dreams. Vivid ones. He wouldn't talk about them, but my mom once overheard him crying in his sleep, whispering something about red eyes and firelight. He was in his 40s when it started. Didn't believe in any of that stuff. But after the dreams, he started sleeping with the light on. And one day, when he was visiting the old house during a family reunion, he walked out to the fire pit, the same one where Lolo had seen the creature, and just stood there for a long time. Didn't say a word. When he came back inside, he looked pale. He stayed quiet the rest of the night. He passed away a few years after that. Heart failure. Sudden. No warning. But the dreams stopped with him. I visited that house once, when I was about 12. It was half collapsed by then, swallowed by vines and time. My cousin and I stayed for a few nights with some relatives still living nearby. On the second night, I remember waking up and seeing someone crouched by the fire pit. But when I blinked, they were gone. Everyone says it was a dream. Maybe it was. Maybe the stories just got in my head. But when I told my mom about it, she got really quiet. Then she just nodded and said, "You saw it too." These days, the house is mostly gone. The trees have taken it back. Nature always does. But that spot, where the fire pit used to be, nothing grows there. No grass. No weeds. Just packed, dry earth. Like something heavy is still pressing down from beneath. I don't know if I believe in monsters, but I believe in memory. I believe in the weight of stories passed down through hushed tones and sideways glances. And I believe some places remember, especially the ones where blood met fire. My grandfather, my Lolo, was never what you'd call a man of many words. He had this quiet way of sitting still, like a rock near the ocean. You could talk to him for hours and maybe get a grunt, a nod, or if you were lucky, a muttered comment under his breath. But every once in a while, usually after a long day and just enough tuba to loosen the tongue, he'd share something, just a sliver of what he called mga lamang cuento, the old stories. This one came out while my mom was visiting him back in the 90s. She was already living in Australia by then and had brought me with her for the summer. I was a kid, more interested in palm trees and sea creatures than old men telling ghost tales. But that night, something felt different. It was just after dinner. The sky was this hazy purple, fading into black, and the ocean was calm, unnervingly so. We were sitting on a bamboo bench near the water. My mom asked him about the old days, fishing, storms, typhoons. He waved her off at first, but after a minute of silence, he started talking. Slow. Careful. Like the words were wrapped in something sharp. He said, "May gabing hindi kayo makalimutan." There was a night I'll never forget. It happened in the late 1950s or early 60s, long before outboard motors and nylon nets. Back then, fishing was all about patience. You brought your paddle, your lamp, and your gut. That night, Lolo and a friend of his, Manong Cato, a tall man with calloused hands and a voice like gravel, decided to fish past midnight. The tides were right, the sky was clear, and the sea was flat as glass. They had this small wooden banca, barely wide enough for the two of them and their gear. No motor, just paddles and a bamboo torch to draw in the fish. The moon was out, full round, almost unnaturally bright. It cast a long silver ribbon across the water, and Lolo said the sea looked like it had been painted, too smooth to be real. That should have been the first sign. They had just pulled in a decent catch, nothing huge, but enough to keep the family fed for a few days. They were chatting about something mundane, how one of Lolo's pigs had run off into the hills again, when the torchlight flickered. That's when they saw it. At first, they thought it was a bird or a cloud passing over. But it was too defined. It wasn't flying, it was floating, hovering. A figure, unmistakably human-shaped, suspended 10 feet above the water, directly over their boat. No wings. No noise. Just there. And watching them. Manong Cato went pale immediately. He dropped the net in his hands and clutched the edge of the boat like it was the only thing keeping him from falling into the sky. Lolo, ever the stubborn one, stood up slowly, trying to get a better look. He said the figure looked like a man, bare chest, long limbs, face too shadowed to make out. But there was something wrong about how it moved. It didn't sway with the wind or shift with the boat. It just hovered there, completely still, unblinking, unmoving, like it was waiting. And then it dove. Not straight down, not fast. It glided, like it was weightless, but aimed directly at their boat. The first pass nearly flipped them. Water sloshed over the sides, and the boat tilted dangerously. Cato screamed something unintelligible and reached for his knife. Lolo shouted for him to stop, that they'd capsize if they panicked. The figure circled and came again, this time swooping low enough that Lolo could hear the air whistle past. He said it smelled like seawater and something metallic, like rust or blood. Cato was whimpering by then, crouched low in the boat, whispering a prayer over and over under his breath. Lolo had enough. He stood up, feet planted, and stared straight at the thing. When it came around again, just before it could dive, he shouted, loud, firm, and with all the rage and fear in his body. Alam kayo kung sino ka. Kung hindi ka umalis ngayon, susunugin ko ang bahay mo bukas. I know who you are. If you don't leave now, I'll burn your house down tomorrow. For a moment, everything stopped. The water stilled. The figure froze midair. And then slowly it turned its head, not like a person, not smoothly, but in this stiff, twitching motion, and looked at them. Lolo said he could feel it stare. Not see it, feel it. Like cold fingers pressing into the space just above his spine. Then it began to drift backward, slowly, silently, until it vanished into the horizon. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the night. They paddled back in silence, every splash of the oar sounding louder than it should. When they reached shore, Cato kissed the ground and said he'd never fish at night again. And he didn't. Not once in his remaining years. Lolo didn't say much either. Just hauled the fish inside, told Lola to salt them, and sat outside until the sun came up. My mom asked him, years later, what he thought it was. He didn't say a swang or encanto. He didn't name it at all. He just said, there are things out there that don't like to be seen. And when you see them, they want to make sure you forget. There's more to this, though. Because when my mom told me this story, decades after it happened, she added something she'd never told anyone before. When she was around 10, she woke up one night and heard her father whispering to someone outside. She peeked through the wooden slats of the house and saw him standing by the water, talking to no one. Just empty air. But he wasn't scared. He was respectful. Almost sad. She swore she heard him say, "Hindi kayo sinabi sa kanila. Walang nakakaalam kundi ikaw." I didn't tell them. No one knows but you. And then he bowed deep, like a man asking forgiveness. When she asked him about it the next morning, he just smiled and said she must have been dreaming. But she wasn't. I've thought about that story a lot over the years. The floating figure. The way it tried to tip their boat. The way it responded to being called out, like it knew it had been recognized. In Filipino folklore, there are creatures that blend with people, things that hide among the living, some benevolent, most not. Some of them, witches, mangkukulam, mambabarang, have ways of leaving their bodies at night. They travel with the wind or ride the sea. Sometimes they float. Sometimes they feed. But they always react when you threaten something close to them. Like a home. And that's what sticks with me. That threat Lolo made wasn't just random. He said he knew who it was. And that's the kind of threat you only make when you're sure. After Lolo died, we visited his old fishing spot one last time. My mom and I went alone, just before dusk. The water was calm again, like it remembered him. There was an old coconut tree near the beach where he used to tie his boat. It had grown crooked over the years, but it was still there. Still watching. She stood by it for a long time, then placed a candle at its base. I think he kept his promise, she said. He never told anyone who it was. And as the flame flickered, I swear I saw something, a ripple in the water far off, just where the horizon meets the sky. Like someone had dived beneath the surface. No splash. Just a shift. We didn't stay long after that. I've only been out on a boat at night once in my life. That was enough. My mom has a way of telling stories that makes you feel like you're right there with her. In the middle of the jungle, barefoot, sweaty, holding your breath because something's watching from the trees. She doesn't exaggerate, either. No dramatic hand gestures or spooky sound effects. Just her voice, low and steady, like she's remembering something that's been waiting in the dark corners of her memory. This one's always stayed with me. She was around 7 at the time, still living in the village back in the Philippines. Life was simple then, sunburned days, muddy feet, rice for every meal. No electricity. No indoor plumbing. Kids were their own entertainment. If they weren't helping out in the fields or running errands for the grown-ups, they were outside, inventing adventures. On this particular day, she and her younger brother, one of the many uncles I barely know, were out by the edge of the rice fields. It had rained earlier, so everything smelled like wet earth and leaves, and the air buzzed with cicadas. They were poking around a stretch of tall grass not far from a footpath, looking for interesting rocks or sticks or bugs, kid stuff. And that's when they found it. It was tucked under a cluster of low ferns, half buried in the mud. A tiny glass bottle, no bigger than the length of her palm. The glass was cloudy and old-looking, sealed tight with some sort of waxy plug. Inside were a bunch of tiny white pebbles. At first, they looked like beads or seeds, but then they noticed the shape. They weren't round. They were oval, glossy, with small dark dots in the center. They looked like eyes. She told me she didn't feel scared, just curious. It didn't occur to them to be freaked out. Kids, right? Everything's a treasure when you're 7 and bored. They ran home with it, excited to show their dad, my Lolo. They thought maybe it was valuable. Maybe it was magic. Maybe it belonged to some old Spanish priest or something. But when they reached the front of the house and called out for him, something shifted. He was working out near the trees when they approached, sweaty, shirtless, machete in hand, halfway through chopping firewood. But the second he laid eyes on the bottle, he stopped. Completely. His whole body went still, like someone had hit pause. My mom said his face went pale, paler than she'd ever seen it, and he started muttering under his breath in a mix of Tagalog and Bicolano. He walked straight toward them, grabbed the bottle out of her hands without saying a word, and flung it as far as he could toward the far end of the field. And right when it hit the ground, lightning struck. Now it wasn't storming. There were no dark clouds. The sky had cleared hours earlier, and the air was calm. But the flash came out of nowhere, one sharp, electric snap from a clear sky, and struck the exact spot where the bottle had landed. She said the sound shook the entire field. The grass shimmered with static. Even the chickens ran for cover. For a second, everything was silent. Then the insects started chirping again, like nothing had happened. Lolo turned to them, face hard, and said, "Don't ever bring something like that home again. That's not a toy. That's not a game." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Later that night, my mom overheard him whispering with my Lola in the kitchen. She couldn't catch most of it, but she remembers one word clearly. Mangkukulam. A witch. According to local folklore, witches, mangkukulam or barong, sometimes use bottles like that to trap things. Curses. Spirits. Pieces of someone's soul. The objects inside weren't always eyes, exactly, but they were meant to watch. To keep track of whoever picked them up. Some believed they were part of a ritual, left behind as a warning, or worse, a baited hook. Lolo had grown up hearing those stories, and judging by how fast he moved, he believed them. Mom said for weeks after that day, she had dreams about the bottle. In one, she was back in the field, holding it in her hands. But when she tried to drop it, it wouldn't leave her fingers. It stuck like glue, and all around her, the grass turned black and brittle. She could hear someone whispering from inside the bottle. Another dream had her running through the woods, chased by dozens of disembodied eyes floating through the air like fireflies. She said she never told anyone about those dreams, not until she told me. Years later, my uncle, her younger brother, ended up moving back to that same area as an adult. He built a small house near the old field and raised goats. One day, while clearing brush near the far end of his property, he found a piece of glass. Just one shard. Frosted, cloudy, edges worn smooth by time. He recognized it immediately. Didn't say a word to anyone. Just picked it up with a pair of tongs, dropped it into a tin can, and burned it. He told my mom about it months later. Said he didn't want to wait around for lightning this time. I don't know what was in that bottle. No one does. But there's a part of me that wonders. What if it wasn't meant for them? What if it was a trap laid out for someone else, something ancient, long forgotten, left behind like a loaded gun in the grass? And what happens when something like that gets disturbed? I've been to the Philippines once, when I was a kid. I remember the fields, the way the grass hissed when the wind blew through it, the way the trees seemed to lean in and listen. I didn't see any bottles, but I didn't go looking either. Some things are better left buried. Some stories don't come with an explanation. They just settle in the back of your mind, stay quiet for a while, and then resurface at 2 a.m. when the house is too still, and even the wind sounds like it's listening. This is one of those stories. It came from my mom, not in one of those let me freak you out for fun ways. She told it casually, the way someone might mention a childhood memory or a weird dream they once had. We were in the kitchen, I was making tea, and out of nowhere she said, "You know, I once saw a man no taller than my knees drag a full-grown pig into the forest." I thought she was joking. I even laughed. She didn't. This happened when she was maybe 15 or 16. She was living with her family in a small village surrounded by dense forest and wide fields in Cameron Sur, back in the mid-1960s. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone. You could hear your neighbor sneeze 3 houses over, and kids played in rice paddies until the sky turned purple. It was the usual provincial life. Roosters at dawn, church bells at noon, dinner cooked over firewood and eaten with bare hands. Their house sat on the edge of the village, with tall grasses and patches of woods beginning just past the backyard. Her family raised a few animals, pigs, goats, chickens, and her parents spent most of the day working the field they shared with an aunt's family down the road. That particular afternoon had been hot, the kind of heat that made the trees buzz with invisible insects and the dogs stretch out in dusty shade patches. My mom had been in the camote, sweet potato, patch most of the day, and just as the sun was starting to lower, she'd gone out back to check on the pigs before heading inside. That's when she heard the noise. Not a scream, not a grunt, just rustling. She turned, expecting to see one of the goats loose again, maybe chewing the banana trees like it loved to do, but what she saw made her stop cold. There, just past the edge of the clearing, at the tree line where the tall grass met the forest, was a man. Or at least shaped like one. But he was tiny. Not child-sized. Smaller. My mom swears he stood no taller than her knees, maybe a little more, wearing what looked like brown woven cloth draped over one shoulder like a sash, and he was barefoot. His skin was tanned and smooth, almost the color of tree bark, and his hair was wild, black, thick, reaching past his shoulders. He was dragging something behind him. At first, she thought it was just a bundle of firewood. But then she saw the legs. A pig. One of their pigs. And not a piglet either. A full-grown one. Easily over 100 pounds. She blinked. He didn't. He just kept walking, back hunched, dragging the pig through the grass with one hand like it was nothing more than a basket of laundry. She couldn't move. She told me there was no sound. No birds, no crickets. Even the wind had stopped. Everything in the world had frozen, except for that tiny man and the limp pig behind him. She watched him walk straight into the trees and disappear into the foliage without a single snap of a branch or crunch of a leaf. And then all at once, the world started moving again. The insects came back. The wind stirred the leaves. A distant rooster crowed. She ran inside. Now here's the part that always chills me. When she burst into the house, sweaty and breathless, her mother, my Lola, was already waiting for her. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't look surprised. She just said, "Close the windows. Don't talk about it." That was it. No questions. No comfort. Just silence. They found the pig pen open, gate unlatched, and muddy prints trailing into the trees. But no blood. No signs of a struggle. And no pig. They didn't talk about it again. Until that day in the kitchen, decades later. My mom said she never told anyone else the story until that day in the kitchen with me. Not her sisters, not her friends, not even my dad. Just held on to it, like a pebble in her pocket that she didn't want to lose or explain. When I asked her why she never brought it up again, she shrugged and said, "There are things you don't chase, Anik. Some stories walk by you once. You're lucky when they keep walking." I didn't understand what she meant until much later. She said she didn't sleep much that night after seeing the little man. She stayed up in bed, listening to the dogs bark in short bursts from different corners of the village, then stopped suddenly, like something had hushed them. The kind of silence that creeps in sideways. Unnatural. Dense. At one point, she thought she saw movement outside the sawali, woven bamboo, walls of their bedroom. A shadow shifting just beyond the light of the lantern. But she never dared open the window to check. The next morning, she woke early. Earlier than usual. The roosters hadn't crowed yet. She said she felt like the house was holding its breath. She went outside and saw footprints. Tiny barefoot prints in the dirt, circling the pig pen. Not like a child's. No. These were narrow, long, with toes spread almost like a monkey's. She followed them for maybe 5 feet before they disappeared. No fade, no scatter, just gone. Like the thing had stepped out of the world. She didn't go any further. That afternoon, the barangay captain visited every house, warning the villagers that pigs had gone missing in nearby areas too. No signs of theft. No traps. Just vanished. A few families swore they saw something strange the night before, small shadows moving through the underbrush, always just out of reach. One woman claimed she saw her dog barking wildly at a tree stump, only for the stump to blink and run off on 2 legs. No one laughed. Not out there. A few days later, my great-uncle, my Lolo's younger brother, came to visit from a nearby town. My mom overheard him talking to her father outside after dinner. Low voices. But the phrase Dewata sa lupa came up. Spirits of the earth. Not the glowing fairies people think of from movies or fairy tales. No wings. No sparkle. These were older. Deeper. Forest folk. Tree walkers. Little people. The old ones said they lived in the hills and moved through the roots. Some were kind. Most weren't. They didn't like being watched. And they didn't like being disturbed. Some of them took things. Pigs. Children. Memories. That last one stuck with me. Memories. I asked my mom what she meant by that, and she said, "Sometimes you remember something, but you don't remember why it matters. You see a tree and feel afraid. You wake up crying, but don't know what from. That's how they leave marks." I didn't sleep well that night after she told me all this. And I'll be honest, I was a grown adult when I looked up similar stories online. Different cultures, different names. But the same patterns showed up. Tiny humanoids, strength beyond explanation, deep forest behavior, tied to missing livestock or children. Even in parts of the U.S., in rural places, people had names for them: ground folk, the still ones, pale walkers. Always elusive. Always just beyond the corner of your vision. But here's the weirdest part. I once brought this story up to a friend who'd grown up in a province up north in Luzon. I didn't tell him the full version, just mentioned that my mom once saw something small and strange dragging a pig into the forest. He didn't blink. Just said, "Was it near sunset?" I said, "Yeah." He nodded. "That's their hour." Now, here's something else I haven't told many people. Years after my mom passed away, I visited the province. First time back in a long while. The house was gone, just overgrown brush and the outlines of where the old garden had been. I stood near where the pig pen used to be, just letting the memory settle. The trees were taller now, the air thicker, and then I heard it, a dragging sound, faint, like something soft being pulled across leaves. I turned fast. Nothing. But there, about 10 feet away in the dirt, was a long, shallow groove. No prints, just one clean trail. I didn't wait around to see where it led. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe an animal. Maybe my mind playing tricks on me. But I've thought about it a lot since. And I wonder, was it a coincidence that my mom saw what she saw at that exact age? That exact time? That exact place? Because when she told me the story, she didn't sound confused. She didn't wonder whether it was real. She knew what she saw. The only mystery was why her, and if she was meant to see it at all. I didn't tell anyone about the dragging sound I heard that day. Not my cousins, not the caretaker who watched me from the road, not even the driver who picked me up an hour later and asked if I'd seen any tuco lizards. I just nodded, kept my mouth shut, and told myself it was nothing. But deep down, I think something had been waiting, watching. Maybe it saw me standing there, remembering her story. Maybe it remembered her too. And maybe, just maybe, it wanted me to know it was still there. A week after that visit, I flew back home. Slept hard for a few nights. But then the dream started. Nothing graphic. No monsters. No blood. Just the same scene, over and over. A small figure standing at the edge of a tree line. Just beyond the tall grass. Never moving. Never speaking. Just watching. And behind it, something massive, shadowed, silent. As if the forest itself was leaning in closer, listening. Every time I tried to move toward the figure in the dream, my legs would sink. Like I was walking through mud that didn't want to let go. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like I'd run for miles. The dreams kept coming for a month. Then they stopped. And just like that, it felt like the door had closed again. I spoke to a Hylet, a local healer, about it just out of curiosity. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. All she said was, "You stepped where she stepped." You saw where her story ended. Some things don't like to be forgotten. Then she gave me a piece of white cloth with dried herbs tied inside and told me to burn it on the next full moon. Said it was for disconnection. I did it, of course. Didn't want to take any chances. It's been a few years now. I still think about that story more often than I probably should. Not just the moment, the sight of the tiny man pulling the pig, but the silence around it. The way everyone just accepted it. No one questioned it. No one tried to chase it down. Because in places like that, you don't chase the forest. You let it pass. You close your windows. And you don't speak of it again. I've come to realize that not all stories are meant to teach you something. Some are just meant to warn you. And this one whispers, don't follow the footprints, even if they're small. I've never liked camping. There's something about being so far removed from everything, no walls, no doors, no lights, that makes me feel exposed in ways I can't explain. I've always been a city person, but back in 2012, I regrettably agreed to go camping for a night with a friend of mine, Chris, on a piece of private land he had permission to use. It was supposed to be safe. Familiar. Well, the land sat on the edge of a long, narrow lake in the rural southeast United States, somewhere between the suburbs and the kind of woods that swallow sound. The lake wasn't huge. It stretched maybe 100 yards across at its widest, and from our camp, you could see the whole thing. There was a single-lane dirt road that led over a levee and into the property. A metal gate blocked off the entrance, and we had the code. No one else could get in. We were alone. Or so I thought. We set up our little two-person Coleman tent on the flattest patch of grass we could find, unpacked our sleeping bags, and started a fire. It was a clear night. Stars punched holes in the sky, and the lake shimmered in the moonlight. The stillness was unnerving at first, but I told myself I'd get used to it. Chris was already relaxing, tossing sticks into the fire, talking about nothing in particular. I tried to match his ease, but it never quite settled in. It all started when Chris sat bolt upright and pointed across the lake. "You see that guy over there?" I frowned and turned to look. "Where?" "Over there. In the trees. Right at the waterline." I stared across the lake, squinting. All I saw was the treeline, dark, unmoving. "I think it's just shadows," I said. "Or the moon playing tricks." But Chris didn't laugh or shrug it off. His eyes were locked on the far side of the lake, and his voice was tight. "No, seriously. Look closer. There's faces. A bunch of them." I looked again. He was right. Lined up along the tree trunks, just barely poking out from behind the bark, were maybe 15 or 20 pale, round faces. They weren't glowing exactly, but they were faintly illuminated, like the moonlight clung to them. They didn't move. They didn't blink. They just stared straight at us from across the water. Only their heads were visible, as if their bodies were hidden behind the trees on purpose. I can't explain the feeling that washed over me in that moment. It was like every nerve in my body had been rewired to one purpose: run. But I didn't. Neither did Chris. We sat there, frozen, staring back. They didn't move. Not an inch. Not even when the fire popped, or when I shifted my weight on the log. I kept waiting for my brain to come up with some logical conclusion. Maybe they were owls. Maybe signs nailed to trees. Maybe, God help me, reflections of the moon on rocks. But I knew better. So did Chris. They're not human, he whispered. Look at their faces. He was right again. The proportions were off. Too flat. Too smooth. They looked like masks. Childlike, but not in a way that felt innocent. More like something pretending to be human and not quite getting it right. We stared at them for what felt like 5 minutes. Then I blinked, looked away for just a second, and when I turned back, they were gone. Just like that. Vanished. But the quiet they left behind was worse. The lake had been silent before, but now it felt wrong. Like something had been disturbed. Across the water, we heard movement, something large shifting through the underbrush. A branch snapped. Then another. Whatever it wasn't trying to stay hidden anymore. Here's the thing most people don't realize about lakes at night. They carry sound too well. Every leaf crunch, every broken twig echoed across the water like it was happening right next to us. I gripped the handle of my flashlight, not turning it on yet, just needing the weight of it in my hand. What the hell were those things? Chris asked. I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. We didn't sleep. Not a wink. We stayed up by the fire, backs to the tent, eyes on the woods. Every time the fire started to die down, we threw more wood on it, afraid of what might happen in the dark. Eventually dawn broke. The light came slow and gray, but it was enough for us to pack up and leave. We didn't even eat breakfast. We just wanted to get out. A few days later, I posted some photos of the trip on Facebook, just scenic stuff. The fire, the tent, the lake. One of our mutual friends messaged me. Hey, he wrote. Did you guys hear or see anything weird while you were out there? My heart skipped. I replied, why? What do you mean? He told me he and another friend had camped in the same area a few weeks before. They had brought a dog with them. One night, they heard a woman crying out near the road that ran along the woods. Thinking someone might be hurt, they grabbed a flashlight and went to check. As soon as they called out to her, the crying stopped. Instantly. No footsteps. No replays. Just silence. They turned back toward the camp, and when they got there, their dog was collapsed by the fire, convulsing, foaming at the mouth. They rushed him to the car, thinking he was dying. But halfway down the mountain, the dog stopped twitching. Just stopped. And when they reached the base, he was fine. Totally normal. Like nothing had happened. I sat there staring at the screen, sick to my stomach. I told him about the faces. About the way they watched us. About the sounds in the woods. He didn't reply for a while. Then he said, that's the same area. Right near the north bend of the lake, yeah. I confirmed it. A week later, he offered to take me back there, to show me exactly where it all happened. When we drove out there, something in my gut twisted. The trees looked the same, but now they felt different. Like they remembered us. Like they were waiting. We parked near the same levee and walked to the old campsite. I didn't even need to be told, I knew. It was the exact spot where I saw those faces. The same curve in the trees. The same faint line of sight across the water. I stood there, staring at the trees, and I swear I felt something looking back. I've done 2 deployments, gone through live-fire drills in the dead of night, and sat in silence for hours in places where even the birds seemed too scared to make a sound. But there's one story I don't tell often, mostly because I still don't know what to make of it myself. It happened a few years ago during a routine field training exercise in northern Washington. We were out in the middle of nowhere, deep enough into the woods that GPS started to get spotty and compasses weren't much more comforting. The air felt thick out there, not humid, just heavy like the trees were pressing in on you. A lot of guys didn't like that stretch of forest. They said it felt off, but no one could really explain what they meant. The op was supposed to be straightforward. We'd ruck out 5 clicks, set up a temporary camp, and run a series of squad-based maneuvers over the course of 3 days. No big deal. I'd done worse in worse conditions. We were all tired, sure, but the mood was decent. Morale was high. Day 2, things started to shift. We were supposed to move in staggered intervals, practicing formation transitions and silent movement. Pretty standard. I was fire team lead, so I kept my head on a swivel, making sure no one got separated. The terrain was uneven, lots of tree roots, hidden sinkholes, and thorny underbrush. You had to watch your footing constantly. About halfway through the trek, while we were moving through a particularly dense patch of pine, I called a quick halt to reorient. Everyone checked in, gave a thumbs up. Then we set off again. I don't know how it happened. One moment I was watching my guy ahead of me, the next, he was gone. Not in a magical, blink of an eye way. Just the trail curved, I looked away for a second, and when I looked back, the entire team seemed to have vanished. I turned around, and didn't see anyone behind me either. I called out softly, nothing. No response. I didn't panic. Not yet. I figured they were just around the bend, maybe moving faster than they should have. I picked up my pace, scanning the trees. But the more I walked, the more I realized something was off. The forest was quiet. Not just regular quiet, the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. No birds, no wind, not even the rustle of small animals in the brush. Just the sound of my boots crunching slowly over pine needles and the occasional creak of my rucksack straps. That silence got to me. It started to feel like I wasn't alone, even though I couldn't see anyone. I'd stop walking, and I'd swear I could hear movement just behind me, but every time I turned around, there was nothing there. No one. Just empty woods and that suffocating quiet. I reached for the radio clipped to my vest and clicked it on. Alpha 6, this is Bravo 3. Do you copy? Static. I switched channels. Alpha 6, this is Bravo 3. Anyone out there? Again, pure static. No snap of a mic, no garbled reply. Just that low, crackling hiss like the radio was trying to work, but couldn't find anything to latch onto. I kept walking. There wasn't really another option. I figured if I kept heading in the general direction we were supposed to be going, I'd either run into them or reach the rally point. That's when I saw them. 3 figures, standing still about 30 meters ahead. They were half obscured by the trees, just silhouettes at first. As I got closer, I could make out the details: camouflage uniforms, helmets, rifles slung across their chests. I felt a wave of relief. Finally. Hey! I called out, raising a hand. There you guys are. I thought I lost you. They didn't move. I slowed to a walk, squinting through the branches. Their faces were hidden in shadow, but from what I could see, they didn't look familiar. I tried to make out name tapes, insignias, something, but everything was blurred out by the dim light and the way the shadows fell across their gear. I stopped about 15 feet from them. They still hadn't said a word. You guys with Alpha? I asked. No reply. Something about them was wrong. They were too still. Not in a disciplined, parade ground way. Unnaturally still, like mannequins frozen mid-step. One of them had a deep gouge across his chest plate, the kind you'd see from shrapnel or maybe a training accident gone wrong. Another's boots were caked in thick, dark mud that didn't match the dry trail I had just walked. And then one of them moved slowly, deliberately. He raised his arm and pointed to the right, toward a narrow ridgeline. No words. No sound. I hesitated. That was not the direction we were supposed to be going. I was nearly certain. Still, a part of me, some buried instinct, told me to follow. So I did. I moved past them, not daring to look directly into their faces. I kept walking, glancing over my shoulder once. They hadn't moved, still standing there like statues. About 15 minutes later, I found the camp. I must have come in from a weird angle because I emerged from the tree line on the opposite side of the perimeter. As soon as I stepped into the clearing, one of the guys on watch spotted me. Bravo 3, that you? Yeah, I called back, lowering my rifle. Got turned around. My squad leader met me halfway, his face hard. Where the hell have you been? You were the last one. We've been waiting almost an hour. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What could I even say? I ran into 3 guys out there, I said finally. Didn't recognize them. Thought they might have been from another unit. His expression changed instantly. He looked pale, like I'd just slapped him. What 3 guys? I frowned. 3 soldiers. Full gear. One pointed me toward the ridge. Figured they were with one of the other squads. He shook his head slowly. There's nobody else out here. Just us. And we've all been accounted for. That night, after chow, I sat by the fire with a few of the other guys. I told them what had happened, carefully, trying not to sound crazy. I expected them to laugh or brush it off. They didn't. One of the older guys, Staff Sergeant Morales, leaned forward, his face serious. You saw them, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. You've seen them too? He nodded. Not me. But it's not the first time someone's come back from that part of the woods talking about 3 silent men. He told us the story. Years ago, during another training op in the same forest, 3 soldiers disappeared. No gunfire, no distress calls, just gone. No gear was ever found. Since then, people have seen them. Always 3. Always silent. Sometimes pointing. Sometimes just watching. Some guys say the figures helped them find their way back. Others say they were led deeper into the woods. One soldier ended up nearly hypothermic before they found him. Another swore the figures turned and walked straight into a tree and vanished. Whatever they are, Morales said, they're not part of the training. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about those faces, blank, unmoving, watching. I hadn't felt threatened exactly, but I hadn't felt safe either. It was like being studied by something that used to be human. Or maybe something that never was. I've been back to that forest since. Not for training, just driving through the area years later. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. And I've never told anyone outside the unit about what I saw. Not until now. Because the truth is, I'm still not sure what I encountered out there in the woods. But I know this, they saw me. And they let me go. I've always had a habit of walking my dog through the woods near my neighborhood. It's this thick little patch of forest that cuts through a few residential zones. Not huge, you can walk the whole loop in maybe 20 minutes, but it's quiet, peaceful, and for the most part, uneventful. I live in a fairly normal area. Suburbs, families, streetlights, the occasional teenager blasting music out of their car at ungodly hours. Nothing unusual. But that forest? It's different. It holds sound weird. Sometimes, when I walk through it, I can hear my own footsteps echo back at me in ways that don't make sense. Like it's deeper than it is. Like it goes somewhere else. I usually walk my dog, Coco, sometime between 5 and 6 p.m. during the summer. In the winter, I go a little earlier because it gets dark so quickly. On this particular day, not even that long ago, I got caught up at the gym and didn't get home until almost 7:30. It was already pitch black by then. I figured I'd just take Coco for a quick spin around the loop, flashlight in hand, nothing crazy. That decision still messes with my head. At first, everything was fine. Coco was sniffing plants, tugging me around like usual. He's a small dog, but he's energetic, normally bouncing around, ears perked, tail wagging. But that night, the deeper we went into the woods, the closer he stuck to me. Like glue. I kept tripping over him, his leash getting tangled around my ankles. "Come on, bud," I muttered. "You're acting like a baby." He didn't respond, obviously. But his tail wasn't wagging. His ears were pinned back, and his eyes kept darting around like he was expecting something to jump out. I thought maybe he was just picking up on the dark. Dogs sense that kind of thing, right? Maybe he heard a raccoon or smelled something weird. I told myself not to overthink it. We passed the first of the abandoned houses. There are a couple scattered along the trail, old, rotting things with sagging porches and vines growing through the windows. I've walked past them 100 times without issue. I even used to take photos of them for fun. But that night they felt different. Still. Too still. We were maybe halfway through the loop when Coco stopped to sniff a bush. I let him do his thing and wandered a few steps ahead, just far enough that I had to turn around to see him. "Coco, let's go. We need to get home." And then I heard it. My voice. The exact words I had just said, repeated back to me. Same tone. Same cadence. Same everything. "Coco, let's go. We need to get home." But it wasn't me. The voice came from behind me, maybe 10 or 15 feet back, right around where Coco had been sniffing. I froze. I didn't even turn around at first. My brain was working overtime trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was an echo. Maybe someone else was walking nearby and mimicked me as a joke. But the words didn't just sound like mine, they were mine. Perfectly. Like a recording. But there was no delay. No static. No reason. Finally I turned. There was nothing there. Coco had already bolted up next to me, tail between his legs, whining quietly. I scooped him up without thinking and just ran. I didn't care about the leash. I didn't care about the rules. I just ran past the house, past the trail signs, past the part of the forest where everything always feels a little colder. I only stopped when I hit the mouth of the trail again, streetlights glowing orange in the distance. My lungs were burning. Coco was trembling in my arms. When I got home, I dropped to the floor and just sat there, trying to make sense of what happened. My mom came home about 20 minutes later. I told her everything, the voice, the feeling, the way Coco had acted. She didn't laugh. She didn't call me crazy. She sat down across from me and said, "I think I had something weird happen in that forest, too." She told me that not long ago, while walking Coco during the day, she saw a dog in the woods. Not a normal dog. Something was off about it. It looked like a dog, but wrong somehow. She couldn't explain it, just that it looked like a picture of a dog, like someone had drawn it from memory and got the proportions slightly wrong. The eyes were off, she said. And the way it moved, it wasn't right. Like it was trying to act natural. That jogged a memory for me. I'd read something online about the uncanny valley, how our brains are wired to recognize when something looks almost human but not quite. It causes this deep, primal fear. Like something pretending to be human, just well enough to fool you if you're not paying close attention. I started wondering if something like that applied to animals too. What if there really was something in those woods pretending to be a dog? Or mimicking voices? I'd also recently read a story about skinwalkers, creatures from Native American folklore that can mimic voices and take on the form of animals or people. I didn't know if I believed in that kind of stuff. But that night, I believed something was out there. The next night, nothing happened. I took Coco out earlier, stuck to the sidewalk, avoided the woods completely. I told myself we were fine. That maybe I'd imagined it. That maybe stress was finally catching up to me. But then came Tuesday. I didn't get home until just before 7 again. I was tired. I forgot to walk Coco. So I grabbed his leash and we headed out, this time staying close to the neighborhood. I figured I'd just let him do his business and come back. But Coco, once again, led me toward the entrance of the woods. I didn't even realize where we were until I saw the light post. There's a single post about 30 meters into the trail entrance. It's always on, always buzzing faintly. But that night it was out. No light. Just pitch black. I pulled out my phone, switched on the flashlight, and glanced around. Coco was eating grass like he always does. I tapped his leash and said, "Coco, no. Let's go. You're not allowed." And then again I heard it. "Coco, let's go." Slightly different this time. The pitch was just a bit too high. The rhythm was off. But it was close enough to freeze me in place. I was still on the phone with my mom at the time, thank God. I didn't explain. I didn't wait. I just scooped up Coco again and ran. This time, I passed the house my mom had mentioned. The one where she saw the weird dog. I didn't look. I didn't want to know if something was watching me from the porch or the trees. I just ran until we were back on pavement. When we got home, my mom was already inside. I told her everything. Again. This time we didn't just talk about it, we saged the house. Burned incense in every room. I don't know if it helped, but I needed to do something. Anything. That night, nothing strange happened. I went to bed exhausted, and for the first time in days, I slept straight through. But then Wednesday came. Around 11:30 p.m., the same time it happened the night before, I heard something outside my window. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I live in a house, not an apartment, and my room is on the ground floor. There's a big metal wall just a few feet from my window, so there's no view. No way for anyone to just be passing by. I froze. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Eventually, the footsteps stopped. I must have fallen asleep again out of sheer fear, because when I woke up, it was morning. I told my mom, and we saged the house again. This time, she took it more seriously. She went room by room, muttering prayers under her breath, waving the smoke into every corner. That evening around 6:40, I took Coco out again. This time I was more cautious. I stayed on the phone with my mom the whole time. We were just chatting, talking about groceries or something, when I realized Coco had once again led me to the forest entrance. The same light post was still out. I was tired. My brain was fried. I wanted to believe it was just a coincidence. Just a broken bulb. But then Coco stopped again to eat grass. And I said, "Coco, no. Let's go." And I heard it. Again. "Coco, let's go." But this time it sounded different. Almost like an echo that didn't belong. Like someone saying those words underwater. It had a strange warble to it. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed Coco and bolted. We ran the exact same route as before, past the same abandoned house, past the same trees. I didn't stop until we were back at the street. That night, around 11:30, I was in my room again. I'd just showered. My cat was sitting on the windowsill, staring at the metal wall outside. Just staring. She doesn't normally do that. There's nothing to see. But she was frozen, ears forward, eyes wide. I shut the window, closed the blinds, turned on every light I could find. On Friday, I sat down with my mom and we talked everything over. Every detail. We decided to sage the house one more time. This time we made it a whole process. Prayers, salt at the doors, incense, everything. I don't know if it's over. I don't know if it's following me. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And if you've read this far, just know I'm not making this up. The thing in the woods wasn't human. And it sounded just like me. I don't scare easy. I don't say that to sound tough, it's just the truth. I've seen some dark things in my life. Been through a few situations that made me question reality. But nothing has stuck with me the way this did. It happened when I was 24. I had just moved into my first real apartment. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The building was older, probably late 60s construction. You could tell by the layout, tight hallways, popcorn ceilings, the kind of carpet that never really looks clean no matter how many times you vacuum. The bathroom had this big mirror above the sink. Not fancy either. Just a single pane, no frame, slightly warped around the edges from years of moisture and heat. It was mounted on the wall with those little plastic clips, the kind you can pop off with a screwdriver if you're not careful. Anyway, I'd been living there for a couple weeks when I noticed something strange. It started small. Normal even. I'd catch movement in the mirror, but only when I wasn't looking directly at it. You know how sometimes you think you see something out of the corner of your eye, but when you turn, there's nothing? That. At first, I chalked it up to stress. I was working 2 jobs at the time, barely sleeping, eating like crap. My brain was probably just frayed at the edges. But over the next few days, it got worse. I'd be brushing my teeth, look down for a second, and when I glanced up again, I could have sworn the reflection was smiling. Not me. The reflection. Like it was half a second ahead of me. Like it knew something I didn't. Then came the night I saw the man. I'd come home late after a double shift, fast food in the morning, warehouse overnight. My legs felt like concrete. I peeled off my boots, dropped my bag at the door, and stumbled into the bathroom to wash my face. The mirror was fogged up, but not from steam, just from the cold outside mixing with the warm air inside. I wiped it with my forearm, leaned over the sink, and looked up. And there he was. Not behind me. Not in the room. In the mirror. He was standing where I was supposed to be. He looked like me, but not exactly. Same build. Same shape. But the skin was too pale, the features too sharp. His eyes were wrong too, smaller, darker. And he was smiling. Not a friendly smile. Not a grin. A full, tight-lipped, stretched smile that didn't match the rest of his face. I jumped back, hit the wall behind me. My heart was in my throat. I blinked, and he was gone. Just me again. Pale, tired, but me. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in bed, lights on, eyes on the hallway that led to the bathroom. The next morning, I convinced myself it was a hallucination. My mind playing tricks on me. I'd been pulling 16-hour days, barely eating, barely functioning. So I threw a towel over the mirror. That helped. For a while. But then I started hearing things. It was subtle at first. A soft creaking, like someone shifting their weight in the room when no one else was there. Then whispers. Not constant. Just once in a while. Like someone saying my name from another room. I'd be in bed, half asleep, and I'd hear it. Evan. My name, whispered like a secret. Soft. Close. But when I got up to check, the apartment was empty. One night, I came home to find the towel on the floor. No windows were open. No draft. Just the towel, neatly folded beneath the sink like someone had placed it there. That night, I didn't go in the bathroom at all. I brushed my teeth in the kitchen sink and left the lights on. But even as I lay in bed, I could feel it. Like something was watching me through the wall. It all came to a head about a week later. I'd had a better day. Work wasn't as bad. I'd eaten a real meal for once, taken a shower, even changed the sheets on my bed. I felt human. I was in the kitchen making a late dinner when I heard the bathroom door creak open. It was closed a second ago. I was sure of it. I froze, spatula still in hand. Then slowly I turned toward the hallway. The door was open. Just a few inches. Enough that I could see the edge of the mirror in the reflection of the tile. And someone was standing in front of it. I couldn't see the whole figure. Just the shoulder. The side of the head. But it was enough. He was back. That same pale version of me, lurking in the reflection. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then slowly the door began to close. Not slammed. Not pulled. Just gently pushed shut, like someone didn't want to be seen. I dropped the spatula and left the apartment. I stayed at a friend's place that night. I told him I was having plumbing issues. He didn't ask questions. I didn't offer any. The next morning I went back. Everything looked normal. Nothing out of place. The mirror was uncovered again, but I didn't remember removing the towel. I couldn't even remember the last time I touched it. I tried to be brave. I stood in front of the mirror. Stared into it. Just me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there. Just beneath the surface. Waiting. I started researching weird mirror phenomena. Not on ghost hunting forums or Reddit threads, actual folklore. I found stories about mirror watchers in old European tales, spirits that live in glass, feeding off attention. Some cultures used to cover mirrors after someone died, so the soul wouldn't get trapped. Others believed mirrors could show your true self, or something else entirely. One story stuck with me, a tale from Eastern Europe about a grinning man who appears in reflections during times of emotional vulnerability. Not a demon, not a ghost, something older, something that mimics, watches, waits. I stopped using the bathroom mirror entirely, bought a little hand mirror from a thrift store, and kept it in the kitchen. It wasn't ideal, but it was safer. Then one night I had a dream. In it, I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror again. The lights were flickering, and the reflection was just off. Not me, not anyone, just a dark shape shifting in and out of focus. Then the smiling man stepped forward. He didn't say anything, just stared, his head tilted slightly to the side, like he was studying me. And then he reached out. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. I moved out 2 weeks later, packed up everything, broke my lease, and left the mirror behind. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know if it was real or a product of sleep deprivation and stress. But I still won't sleep with a mirror facing my bed. I cover them. Always. This happened when I was around 13, old enough to think I was invincible, but still young enough to be dumb about it. I grew up in a small mountain town, tucked away in the kind of place where most people leave their doors unlocked, and the biggest scandal is someone's dog chasing deer too close to the road. My best friend at the time was a kid named Darren. He lived about a mile down from me, and we'd meet up after school almost every day to explore the woods behind his house. These weren't national park woods or manicured trails. These were thick, wild forests, briars, fallen trees, weird little clearings, and the occasional rusted-out car shell from God knows when. To us, it was heaven. We knew every inch of those woods, where the big rock outcroppings were, which trees you could climb, where the creeks ran deepest. But there was one area we didn't mess with too much, a section about 15 minutes into the forest, where the trees were weirdly thin and straight, and the ground never dried out no matter how hot it got. We called it the Small Woods. I know that sounds dumb, like something a little kid would label, but it just fit. The trees were weirdly short compared to the rest of the forest, and the atmosphere felt dense, compressed, like the air was thicker there. We'd go near it sometimes, walk the edge, throw rocks into it, but we didn't go in. Not really. Until one day we did. It was early spring. I remember because the snow had all melted and the mud was still fresh from the runoff. The sun was out and we were bored. Darren had brought his BB gun, and we were taking turns shooting cans off a stump. After about an hour, we ran out of stuff to shoot, and he turned to me and said, "Want to go to the Small Woods?" I hesitated. "Just for a second," he added. "We don't have to go far." So of course, being 13 and not wanting to look like a coward, I said yes. We crossed the threshold like it was nothing. Just stepped from one part of the forest to another. But the second we did, I felt it. That shift. Like the temperature dropped by a few degrees. The air got heavier. The sounds changed too. No birds, no wind, just the occasional drip of water from the trees. We kept walking. About 5 minutes in, we found a little clearing. Not a big one. Maybe the size of a backyard. There was an old log in the middle, partially rotted, and a few odd-looking holes in the ground. Perfectly round like post holes, but too deep and too wide for fence work. I remember thinking it looked like something had been dug up, or unearthed. We sat on the log for a minute, catching our breath, not saying much. Then we heard it. Something moving through the underbrush. Heavy. Deliberate. It wasn't a deer. We knew what deer sounded like. This was slower. More calculated. Like whatever it was didn't care if we heard it. We both stood up, tense. Then it stepped out. At first, I thought it was a wild boar. It was about the right size, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall at the shoulder, built low to the ground. Its fur was dark, patchy, and matted with mud. Its face, though, that's the part one still can't explain. It didn't have tusks. Its snout was shorter than a boar's, more like a dog's, but broader. Its eyes were wrong, too far apart, too round. And the way it looked at us, it wasn't scared. It didn't snort or run. It just stared. We didn't move. The thing walked slowly, almost lazily, toward a thin tree near the edge of the clearing. The tree was maybe 6 inches thick, nothing that could hide a creature that size. But the thing kept walking, circled the tree once, and then casually stepped behind it. and never came out the other side. I blinked. Darren blinked. We both ran. We didn't say anything, didn't look back. Just sprinted through the woods, tripping over roots and smacking branches out of our faces. We didn't stop until we were back in his yard, gasping for air. Neither of us asked the other if we saw it. We just knew we had. We didn't go back to the small woods after that. Not together, not alone. We told ourselves it was just an animal. Maybe a sick bear. Maybe a trick of the light. But deep down we knew better. A few weeks later, Darren's older brother told us a story, completely unprompted, about how he once saw something weird in the woods when he was younger. Said he saw a huge, dark thing crawl out of the creek bed, walk up to a tree, and vanish. Same spot. Same story. He didn't laugh when he told it. Didn't try to scare us. He just said it and moved on. That cemented it for me. It happened during War X week at IMC, which, if you've been through it, you know is brutal. We'd just finished a 10-mile ruck march to a range we called Kilo Ridge, though I'm not sure that was the official name. Everyone was smoked. We were dehydrated, sore, and just praying for a few hours of rest before the next round of drills. It wasn't my first time being dog-tired in the field, but something about that place, it hit different. The tree line around the range was dense. Not jungle dense, but thick enough that you couldn't see more than 10 feet into it. The trees were tall, narrow, and close enough together that the wind made this weird, whistling sound when it tried to pass through. Before we turned in that night, our platoon sergeant pulled us aside and gave us a very specific order. Listen up. If you need to take a leak in the middle of the night, you use the portagons. No exceptions. Do not go past the tree line. I don't care how bad you've got to go. Stay. In. Camp. Everyone kind of laughed it off. We figured it was about keeping guys from sneaking off for a smoke or trying to disappear for a nap. You know, basic field discipline. But his tone was weird. He wasn't joking. He wasn't smiling. Just dead serious, like he meant every word. I didn't think much of it at the time. That night, I passed out almost as soon as I laid down. I remember staring up at the stars for a few seconds, then nothing. Out cold. Then I dreamed. Except it didn't feel like a dream. In it, I was walking through the woods alone. The same woods that bordered our camp. The ground was wet like it had just rained, and the leaves sparkled with dew. There was this light mist hugging the ground, and I could hear insects buzzing, birds chirping, the whole forest alive. It felt peaceful at first, calm in a way I hadn't experienced in weeks. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even confused. It felt right. Then I heard voices. Soft, echoing voices weaving through the trees. Women's voices. Children's laughter. Whispers that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They weren't speaking to me. Not exactly. But they were talking about something. Someone who was lost. Telling me to keep looking for it. That's when the air changed. It went cold. Heavy. Like all the joy had been sucked out in an instant. The chirping stopped. No veres. No bugs. Nothing. Just silence. And then the whispers came back. Not playful this time. Disconnected. Wrong. Like fragments of a broken conversation being played out of sync. I dropped to my knees, hands over my ears, trying to shut them out. But they kept coming, words I didn't understand, voices I didn't recognize. That's when I heard the bells. Faint at first, like tiny sleigh bells jingling with each step. They were getting closer. Louder. I stood up, frozen. My heart was pounding. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was coming. The bells stopped. Right behind me. And then I felt breath. Hot and wet on the back of my neck. I turned around. What I saw still makes my skin crawl. It was massive. Bigger than a moose, but shaped wrong. Its body was long and narrow, covered in coarse, patchy fur. Its legs were too many, 6 or maybe 8, and the front 2 ended in hands. Human hands. Its head was crowned with these massive antlers that looked like they were made of bone and roots twisted together. And its face. It had a long snout like a hyena, but instead of fur, its skin was smooth and leathery. Its cheeks had these strange grooves, almost like gills, and its eyes were tiny, black, and shining. And it was staring right at me. Then a woman began to hum. A soft, strange melody. It felt ancient, like something sung before language ever existed. The creature lowered its head toward mine. And then, I don't know how else to explain this, I heard a voice inside my skull. Deep. Slow. Thick like syrup. Not speaking English. Not speaking anything I knew. But it poured into my head like oil, pressing down on my thoughts, suffocating me. And then I woke up, snapped out of it like someone had dumped ice water on my face. My buddy was shaking me awake for firewatch. "You okay, man?" he asked. "You were sweating like crazy." I nodded, still shaking. "Yeah, just a dream." I threw on my Gore-Tex top, grabbed my rifle, and stepped outside. The night air was sharp and still. Everyone else was asleep. I was posted maybe 6 feet from the tree line, the same one we were told not to cross. I stared at those trees for a long time. Eventually, I felt the urge to pee. I looked at the portagons but didn't want to wake anyone stumbling over tents. The tree line was right there. Quick in, quick out. I took one step toward it, and that's when a deer walked out from the woods. Only it wasn't right. It didn't trot or jump. It just stepped out, slowly, almost like it was being pushed. Then, without warning, it turned and walked backward into the trees. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just turned right there and pissed in the middle of the road, rifle still in my hands. The next morning, we completed our final ruck march back to base. Everyone was dragging, but we were alive. The sight of our squad bay in the distance was one of the best things I'd ever seen. That night, lying in my bunk, I was scrolling through my phone to unwind, and I stumbled across an image, a meme actually. It was a rough sketch of some cryptid or forest spirit, half joking, half serious. It looked exactly like the creature from my dream. I stared at it for a long time, then showed it to my wife later that night. She got chills. The next morning, still unsettled, I casually asked my platoon sergeant what he meant when he told us not to go into the woods. He paused, looked at me for a long second, then gave me this weird little smile. "Do you believe in fairies?" he asked. Then he walked off. To this day, I still think about that dream, about the creature, about the deer walking backward, and about the voice that pressed into my skull like it was trying to live there. My buddy still jokes with me sometimes. "The forest spirit's gonna get you," he'll say with a grin. But I don't laugh.